there's something that you need to know about me is that I love to learn new things. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about note-taking tips. Even though my formal education ended about 2 years ago, I am still learning from various online courses, books, and basically any articles or blog posts I can find online. So today I will talk about the various note-taking tips which helped me in my formal education journey, first during my undergraduation, which was in engineering, and during my post-graduation, which was in MBA. And also how I have evolved those methods into like a self-study practice. So I have divided this video into 3 parts. The first part will be about what to do before your class or like your learning session begins. The second part will be what you should do while you are learning, like the things that you need to keep in mind during your lecture. And the third part will be after your lecture or study session has ended, what the things you should do that will consolidate your learning really into your memory. So without further ado, let's get started. So for before class, if you are in school, chances are you have a textbook for each subject, right? So I would recommend that before you go to that class, you have a fair idea of what is the chapter that the teacher will be covering next. And you should look at the topics and all of the subtopics in the chapter, and then go and don't try to like read it or skim it or anything. Just like keep a note. I used to take a sticky note and I would just write down just the names of the subtopics in that note. And also look at the different important words which are given at the end of the chapter. Usually for history there are important dates, for geography or like maybe biology there are like important terms which are given at the end of the chapter. And also for almost every chapter you would have a set of questions that you're supposed to answer. Usually your teachers give these questions and stuff for homework, but just don't try to find the answers yet. Just focus on what the questions want you to know, so that those terms will be familiar to you when you go to class. And once your teacher mentions these things, they will quickly click in your brain and you will make a note of it. Second is when you have a presentation like or a PPT which has been given to you before class, which is what's usually the case for MBA. And here what we used to do is just go through the presentation once and see the flow of the PPT, because the teachers would obviously explain each slide during class. But once you have the idea of the flow of the topic, then you get a better sense of what is important and what is not, and what things to make note of. Because obviously since the presentation is with us, it does not really make sense to transcribe every single thing that is on it. So we would keep in mind that these are the topics, this information is already with us, and then we would know what is the relevant thing that the professor is saying and what like to note down. In addition to this, during MBA we also got a lot of case studies. So the ideal way to deal with case studies would be that you would read the whole thing, but also pay special attention to the facts and figures and what the actual concept is being discussed within that case study. So every company would have like a different concept attached to it, and at the end of the case study sometimes there were questions as well. So in that case, being prepared before class meant that you would jot down the possible answers for those questions, which would be then discussed in class. So now that I'm doing like a self-paced learning and I don't really have much of a curriculum, and these are just things that I'm interested in learning, I just note down the names of the video topics as my subtopics. And then I know the flow of the thing, like how it is distributed and where to put my focus on the most. And if there is like an upcoming assignment after a video lecture, then I know that and usually in Coursera they write that the assignment is on XYZ topic. So then I know that there's an assignment coming up or there's a quiz coming up, and these things are most relevant to the course. So I make a note of that. Now during class, first up I want to introduce you to my note-taking essentials. The first would be a black ballpoint pen, then a blue ballpoint pen, a simple neon highlighter, and a ruler, and that's it. And I would always take my notes in a lined notebook because I'm not too great with blank notebooks. My writing looks like an aeroplane, so I would just have these basic things. Throughout school and colleges, I've always used a single pen to take down notes in class. I am not a big advocate of making your notes pretty during class, because that completely takes away from the material that is being discussed, and it totally wavers my focus, so I don't do it. And if you have taken the steps which I mentioned in the previous part of the video, then you are already kind of well prepared for class. You're familiar with the topics that are being discussed. So that sticky note which I mentioned, where you should write down the key points and the subtopics, that is also one of the things that you should carry to class, so that you have an idea of the flow of the discussion, and also you are aware at what point the teacher stopped and where she will pick up from the next day. Another most important thing is you should never ever copy what the teacher is saying verbatim, because that does not benefit anybody. I strongly suggest that you take your notes by hand and not type it out, because while typing it is so easy to just completely lose track of what the material is being discussed and just taking dictation sort of. So never do that. Always carry a pen and a notebook to class. I have seen a lot of my friends who do take notes on their laptop, but I honestly does not work for me at all. Another important thing during class is that you should pay special attention to the areas where the teacher spends a lot of time on or repeats again and again, or she will exclusively say that this will be on the test. Like, definitely keep a note of these things. When I was in college, and if the teacher ever said anything like this, I would put like a star mark or a double underline under those parts in my notes, that this will definitely come in the exam. Up till now, I was talking about when you're in like school or college, but now if you are doing like a self-learning curriculum like I am, you can get a little more creative. So what I do while I'm learning is that I always listen to lectures and or 2x speed, because I kind of feel like that is the way that I will focus on the most important points. Because if it's going it's, first of all, 2x is not that fast, because I watch all of my YouTube videos on 2x, so that's kind of the speed that I'm adjusted to. I listen to all my Audible audiobooks also like that, so that's the speed that is comfortable for me. Normal speed feels a little too slow. So when I watch it on 2x, first of all, you take less time. Secondly, whatever is the important bit, it catches my attention quickly, because it's fast, so I'm aware that it's fast and I don't want to miss out on anything, so I pay closer attention. So that has kind of worked out really well for me. And also because it's self-paced, so I can take my time and I make notes. But now most of the things that I'm learning are kind of coding oriented or a little maths and stats related, so there's no need actually to make it pretty, because a lot of the work is done on my laptop. So so I don't take that much effort, but yeah, I do take a lot of effort to comment out my code and write exactly what is happening and explain every step, so that when I come back to it, it's easier for me to understand. So that's kind of the point of having notes, is that it should not be a document that only makes sense in the moment. Like, that's why I really suggest that you take down proper sentences and not just phrases and keywords, because once you come back to it like a few days later, it will not make sense. So you need to create a document for yourself that helps you in learning faster and learning it better, and not just like making the work extra for you. In school and college, I maintained this habit of coming back home and reviewing my notes, and it was kind of this habit that was instilled in me by my mother, that whether you have homework or not, you should at least review whatever you have done in school once you get back. And while I don't think she was aware of this at the time, but I did some research, and there was German psychologist by the name of Hermann Ebbinghaus who created the very famous Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. And I will put an image here. What it basically says is that you start forgetting as soon as you're done learning. So that is the forgetting curve, and as you keep revising what you have learned, the slope of the curve keeps changing, and then you forget less and less. So that's the point, like why people ask you to revise multiple times before you have to give an exam or anything. That if you revise at certain intervals of time, it increases the probability that you are going to remember that information better. So that's why after class revising your notes is super important. In school, teachers mostly stick to the textbook, so there is not much difference between what you are going to take down in your notes and what your textbook is going to say. But in school, what I used to do is I would just look at the two things side by side, go over my notes, and then read my textbook once. And if there were any information that was missing in my notes from the chapter, or like sometimes we used to have these did you know bubbles, which obviously the teachers did not explain in class, but sometimes they would show up on tests. So I would note down those facts in my notes, and yeah, that was it, I think. And also because there were questions at the end of the chapter, so I would write down the answers to those questions, and that was kind of how my revision notes were made. And before exams, I would just read the notes for that chapter and go, and that would be enough. But in college, what used to happen is, since we did not really have a textbook, we had multiple reference books, and luckily for my university, we had something which we call the matrix, but it was not nearly as exciting. It was a study guide basically of all of the chapters that were covered in the exam, and they did not refer to any particular textbook, but it was just like the main concepts and some questions, and that was very, very helpful. And we also had a 10-year question paper bank. So that was those things were like the key to actually doing well in the exams. And once I had my notes, I would just come back home, and here I would rewrite my notes, because there was a lot of consolidating that needed to be done. So everything was not mentioned in class, and everything that was not that was going to be on the test was definitely not taught in class. So since they would just give us like a lot of brief overviews and maybe some practice problems and stuff, so here I would like come back home and rewrite my notes entirely. I would include all of the materials that I had for each concept and write it in such a way that would be easy for me to understand and remember, and here I made them look very pretty. So yeah, the system worked out really well for me during college, and I saved a lot of time during exam time. Although initially this looked like a lot more effort, but when exam time came, I was pretty well prepared. For MBA, it was very different, because we did not really have exams where we were supposed to memorize or remember a lot of things. It was just when the concepts were taught in class, and then we were given a case study based on these concepts, and we were supposed to read it and solve it during the exam. So there was not much like preparation that was needed, but obviously you had to like know certain terms, and if there were calculations involved, you had to know the formulas and stuff. But all of that was basically always in the presentation, so I did not take any extra notes like after my class notes. So I kind of just read both of these. But after, like, the revision part of any MBA class was basically in the projects, because we got a lot of individual and group projects to do, and that sort of solidified whatever we had learned during the classes. And right now what I do is that after I'm done learning, I kind of note down the topics that I've covered that day, and I have a tracker where I write down the day and what topic I have covered. And also I make a checklist for the next day, what I'm going to do, so that I don't waste any time when I'm sitting down to study, because I don't have a lot of time right now since I have a full-time job. So whenever, whatever 1-2 hours I take out in my day to study, I don't want to waste time just thinking about what I should study. So before the end of my study session the previous day, I note down the 2-3 things that I want to cover the following day, and that's basically how I close out my study sessions here. Since I mentioned they're mostly coding related, there are a few like concepts or maybe important things about the syntax or how a particular or data structure or something that I learned. And the next day also, as soon as I sit down for my study session, I will just do like a 5-minute review of everything that I've learned the last day. And it's not obviously like reading everything again, it's just going through the code and seeing that if I remember or not, and in case anything looks a little doubtful, I just go and revise that part. And that is how I keep up with my learning plan now. So far we've talked about how to take notes to make your learning more effective. But there are also different kinds of note-taking methods for different kinds of subjects. Like the way you take notes for a factual subject like history or geography is not going to be the same as the way you take notes for like a STEM subject, you know, like physics or maths. So I'm going to show you 5 different kinds of note-taking methods and how you can use them. I'll give you a quick example using the stuff I have, and I'll also show you some of the actual notes that I have taken during my classes so that you can get a better idea. So the first note-taking method is something which has been pretty popular in the Western circuit, but I have never seen anybody in India use it. And this is called the Cornell Method. So the Cornell Method is actually pretty simple, and I think it's very intuitive for subjects where you have to remember like dates or important terms. And so first you have to just write the title here. So since I'm talking about the note-taking, I'm just writing Cornell Method. And you divide the page into 3 parts. So here you draw one line that divides into columns, and this is kind of the ratio that you need to maintain for the columns, and then you draw another line at the end of the page for this column. And basically what you have to do here is that this column on the left is known as the Q column, and the column on the right is known as the note-taking area, and the column in the bottom is called the summary column. This is a really neat way of summarizing any information that you have picked up during the class. Also, if your teacher has kind of like a Socratic method of teaching where they will ask a question and then they expect an answer, then in the note-taking area you can quickly jot down the main points that need to be in the answer. And this is a very effective way to revise before an exam, especially because after you are done taking the notes here during class, you are expected to write down the cues or the possible questions that can come up in the left side. And after doing that, also summarize everything that you've written down in 1 or 2 lines at the end. So if you keep up this practice at the end of every class, it's going to make you so well prepared before an exam or anything, because then you just have to go through the summaries and the cues for each page and you're done. This is a very, very effective way of taking notes, and I'm really sad it's not more popular. So maybe now some of you can use it and let me know how it goes. Next, we have the outline method. Now, the outline method is really useful for subjects which have like a lot of facts. And essentially what you do is you take higher level bullet points and you break them down into smaller level bullet points to just describe what it is that you're talking about, what you're like learning about. Just to demonstrate here, we're talking about the outline method. And what I would normally do is I take a different color pen for the main idea. So I'm just like making up random things where can, and whatever is like the answers, descriptions that go in like a lower level bullet point, and then you give like an example. You can have different keys for it. So let's just get like a main idea, this is supporting ideas, this arrow can be like an example and things like that. So then you have like main idea 2. And because I studied STEM subjects, so there were a lot of formulas and stuff, right? So if just, for example, there was a formula that I had to remember, then I would just write it, and with a different color, I would make a box around it. For diagram, I never took down the diagram itself. I would take notes with respect to the diagram on the left side of the page and keep the right side like a column empty, and I would put a sticky note where I would draw the diagram after going back home and complete my notes that way. So this was the outline method. Next is mind map, and that is my most favorite method actually, because it gives you a lot of freedom to basically just like think about everything in a bigger picture kind of way. So mind maps are very simple, and I will turn my notebook like this for it. So mind maps are just basically you have one main idea, say, so this is big idea, and that is like the, say, the topic of the chapter, whatever you're studying, right? So and then you move on to like small idea 1 and everything, and then branches out. So all of it branches out from here, and then each of the smaller ideas can also have multiple branches, and you can basically create as wide and complicated a network as you want. But if you want to see something completely, this is the like the right way to get like a bird's eye view of your whole topic. And I used to love doing this for like super factual topics, because suppose like history or something, right? So when you can see the entire, like if you're studying World War, and you can see all of the events that led to it and what happened after it in one page, it's very, very useful to study in that sense, because then you see the effects and consequences all at once and you don't have to memorize them separately. Next up, we have something which is called the flow method. So the flow method was started by this author called Scott Young, and he's most famous actually for having completed the entire 4-year computer science MIT curriculum in 1 year using open source courses. And he used something called accelerated learning so that he could go through all 4 years of work in 1 year. And his videos are very famous, and from him I learned this flow method. And flow method basically is the simplest way to keep your thoughts connected. So if you are studying about, say, this is topic 1, explanation of topic 1, example of topic 1, and then topic 1 has caused the second topic 2, and then description of what topic 2 is doing, and then maybe something else happened. So it's a very easy way to keep everything connected. Like if I'm studying about, again, I'm going to use the history examples. If I'm studying about wars, then maybe understanding the first war and why and what happened and how that the victory or the defeat led to the the following steps in that particular country. All of that like really makes sense when you study in the flow method. And the flow method is supposed to be like the simplest, and this is not supposed to be one of those methods where you kind of go back and make it pretty, because this is going to be exactly a map of your brain. This is not going to be something which you have to transcribe and make it readable, because this is the way in which you show the connections. There is no need to make it pretty. And the final method is I call it the dummy flashcard method. So when I was growing up and I was looking at a lot of videos from these Western YouTubers, they would swear by flashcards, and that was not a concept here, right? And I would always think that, it's so much work trying to even make these flashcards, get the index cards, write on one side, write on the other side. Like, it was so much work. It was just easier to like study from the book. But then I saw some merit in that method, because like you basically have to hide the answer, right? For when you're saying it. So that's like a really effective way of studying. So what I do is that I take this page and I will fold it in half. And the fun part is that I basically fold it in this way, and here I write the terms, and here I will write the definitions. So this is very effective method to study for when you have something which has like a lot of important like vocabulary terms. Say you're learning a new language, right? So if you write here the first word and the translation here, then it's like a flashcard only, because the word is here and your explanation is here. So I think this is also another really useful way of taking notes. And this is, I don't know if you can take this in class, but sometimes we would have such classes for biology when the teacher would just like tell us the different terms and what they mean. So in like those situations, that would have been very useful. So this notebook I wanted to share with you. This is from my 5th semester, I think, and this was a semester where I really worked hard, and you can see it in the notes. I kind of had this pack of 10 colored pens, and I had like a key to go with it, what each would mean, what each color means, and I tried to follow it throughout this notebook. And this is not the notes that I took in class. Obviously, once you see it, you'll realize these are the notes that I made after coming back home with class notes, combining with reference books and the 10-year question papers and stuff like that. So like I said, like for all diagrams, I would put them on a sticky note, and every other information, like for the subheadings, I put them in different colors. The actual writing part of it was in a different color. I studied STEM subjects, so there were a lot of equations which I made stand out in some way. This is how I studied. Then there were like a lot of highlighted areas, which is mostly stuff which is likely to come on the exam. We had a lot of diagrams and stuff to do, and I want to show you one thing, which is a mind map that I made for this particular subject, and I'm pretty proud of it. To find it, I think it's here. Okay, so this was that particular subject which was one of my favorites. It's called microprocessors, and it had a lot of things to remember, and I kind of condensed everything in one page, and you can see like the different levels. It's not exactly like how I showed it to you, but this is also kind of like a mind map with different segmentations and everything being like explained. And this is like half of the flashcard thing kind of that I just talked about. So we had to know what each of these pins does. So I folded a post-it in half, which would like which has the answer, basically what these pins do. So I folded all of them in half so that I could memorize and make sure that I knew the answer. But this is ideally how I take notes. And my post-graduation, it's way simpler. So I would just note down what lesson it was and different points. Did not put in a lot of like flair for it, because like I said, it was from the PPTs that I already had, so I did not need to do all of these things. Okay, so now that I'm studying stuff by myself, this is an example of like a Coursera course, and I kind of follow the same format. So I have a subheading and everything under it, and the star parts are probably the ones which had exam questions or the quizzes and assignments on it. So I don't do too much for it. It's just something that helps me like refer back to it once if I need it, but I don't make it like too pretty or anything. So that was the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. Please comment down below your favorite note-taking method, and if I missed out any particular note-taking method that is your favorite, let me know that also in the comments down below. I'll see you next week. Bye.